Why do you think Digimon Survive has been getting mixed reception? Fans have been review bombing it, the PS4 and Xbox One versions are getting mediocre professional reviews on Metacritic, and there's a decent amount of negative discourse about the game online in general. But why? The main reason is because the game is a visual novel, and that is not a genre that many people expected this to be. I personally believe that Bandai Namco is at least partly to blame here, as I don't think they marketed the game that well. But I still find it odd how many people would just rush out there and buy a $60 product without doing any research. Another major reason is the fact that this game got delayed multiple times. It was originally supposed to come out in 2019, then in 2020, then in 2021, then finally it came out in 2022. The hype was real for Digimon fans. Keep in mind, the last time that you get a new Digimon game was Digimon Story Cyber Sleuth, Hacker's Memory in 2018. Before that was Digimon World Next Order in 2017. Not being a fan of visual novels myself, I only hopped on because of the Digimon name and branding. Amazon delivered my physical Switch copy really early for some reason, and I actually enjoyed what I played. I want to tackle it, but mention a couple of things first. There will be spoilers throughout the entire review, so if one wants to go in blind, just don't watch this. The other thing that needs to be mentioned is the fact that I did a mix of harmony and moral for my playthrough, but ultimately I did the moral ending. I'll get started by giving a brief rundown of the story. The game starts out with a young boy and girl running away from a dark aura of some sort. The game then throws the player into a battle where they take control of both WaruMonaemon and Gabumon in a painfully slow and boring tutorial. The boy manages to get away from the opponents via a portal, but the girl gets stranded all alone and gets eaten by several arms. We are then treated to a nice cutscene that gets us acquainted with the main characters of the game. It is also revealed that an earthquake happened nearby, which in turn caused a landslide. It also shows an old man stuck in the middle of nowhere with creatures watching him, as well as two kids that got attacked earlier. Rewatching the cutscene, I'm surprised at how little I remember of it and how it sets up the game really well. Now we get to the real, let's say, gameplay in heavy quotes. As the game is a visual novel, there is a lot of talking throughout the game. However, very often, the player will get a choice of what to say. This will often do one of two things. The first is to change affinity with one of the other characters. This is important because when a character hits a high enough affinity, their Digimon can digivolve into a higher stage. The other thing that will usually happen is Takuma's state will change. There are three paths to the game: moral, wrathful, and harmony. It took me longer than I care to admit, but if one hovers over an option before picking it, it may glow a color. If it glows red, then it'll raise Takuma's morality. Green will raise harmony, and yellow will raise wrathfulness. Takuma's state is important because it will determine what Ogremon digivolves into. The pattern is usually the left choice is moral, the top choice is wrathful, and the right choice is harmony. Back to the plot. Takuma and his friends, Aoi and Minoru, decide to leave the school and see the cherry blossom trees. They bump into Saki and Ryu, but separate from them to go investigate the landslide that they heard about on the TV. They bump into Saki and Ryu again, but this time they are talking to a little girl. This little girl tells them about the landslide that was caused by the monsters called the Kemengami. The girl reveals her name is Miyu, and she takes both Saki and Ryu to the shrine where the gods are worshipped. Takuma and the other two decide to follow them to the shrine. Shuji, a seemingly good-natured person who is helping out at the school, finds Takuma and the others. A blonde-haired boy named Kaito runs up to them and tells them that he's looking for his younger sister. Suddenly, a blizzard starts to whip up, forcing them to go into the tunnel. They run into a weird archway structure that has a sacred rope on it. They go through the structure and end up in a place that they are completely unfamiliar with. After looking around for a bit, they end up going to the shrine. This is a good time to mention that sometimes in between dialogue, the player can take control and look around. They can hit the shoulder buttons to bounce around between the points of interest. Takuma can also use his camera to find things that are initially hidden from him. The gang finds a little passage that leads them to the ruins that have weird drawings on the sides of them. They run into this old man who claims that he researches the Keiman Ogami. Looking closer at the drawings on the wall, it depicts a village getting attacked by several of these creatures. Miyu runs to the ruins and tells everyone that there is a creature that was creeping on her. The gang gets out of the ruins to discover that Saki and Ryu are getting attacked by a Gatsumon, and a weird thick fog is surrounding the area. Aoi trips while running away from Gatsumon, so Takuma has to get in the way of her attack. He wakes up to several Gatsumon surrounding him, as well as Minoru telling him to run away. But then, everybody gets sucked up into the ground. Takuma wakes up and finds something with his phone. After bouncing around in some bushes, the creature revealed itself to be Koromon. He tells Takuma that he's been waiting for him for literal ages. Takuma gets weirded out and runs away from this creature. Too bad for Takuma, he ran right into another Gatsumon. At first, Takuma tries to take it on his own. Luckily for him, Koromon bails him out. Takuma decides to stay and protect Koromon, which triggers him to digivolve into Agumon. With his newfound partner, Agumon easily defeats the Gatsumon. About an hour later, the prologue is done. I get why people don't like this game, man. The beginning is slow pace. As far as the battling goes, there are only 2 fights, and both of them are tutorial fights. Not to mention that some of the dialogue seems like throwaway material. A lot of people thought that the gameplay of just moving around the map and talking to people is boring. Visual novel games aren't for everyone, and Digimon Survive is undoubtedly no exception. I think that the prologue does a decent job of setting up the game. but damn, I get the complaints that it's slow. Part 1 starts with Aoi and Minaru getting attacked by a Gatsumon. Falcomon and Labramon both reveal themselves to be their partners, but that doesn't stop Minaru from running away. Minaru meets up with Takuma and they both take out the Gatsumon. They both meet up with Aoi and decide to go back to the school. At the school, they find Ryu, who is scared of Quigimon, as he's not aware that they're supposed to be partners. Aoi ends up getting taken away by some creature, as they notice that the school is filled with webs. The gang runs into a young boy and girl named Haru and Miyuki, respectively. The gang runs into a Dokugomon, as they see Aoi tied up in spider webs. Fighting these guys will trigger Agemon's first evolution. I got Tyrannomon because I made mostly harmonic decisions. This is the first fight in the game that actually felt a bit involved. Several of the spider Digimon will attack in the group, and one of them is a bigger size and has higher stats. The game then pans to Shuji, Saki, and the professor. Monsters start to swarm them in a forest, but the professor takes their attack and tells Saki and Shuji to run. Takuma and the gang decide to go back to the shrine when suddenly they are attacked by several Gazamon that apparently beat the shit out of the professor. This fight will trigger Falcomon's champion Digivolution. They decide to go to the dam where they run into Saki and Shuji. However, Saki and Shuji were being chased by a monster named Fangmon. Fangmon pushes the professor off the dam, and the group decides that they need to fight. Labramon will Digivolve during this fight, and I think it's a pretty competent boss fight and all. The gang decides to follow Fangmon to see his condition after the fight, just to see him get destroyed by the fog. Now we get a checkup with brother and sister Kaito and Miu. Kaito hears a large noise and tells Miu to stay put while he searches for the cause. Of course, then Miu disappears. On a side note, Shuji is being a douche to his partner Lopmon. We'll get to see what's coming to him in due time. While setting out for a supposed tall building that Agemon saw, the group runs into Kaito and a strange woman. I picked the option to not trust the woman because she seemed weird, but I guess that just doesn't matter. Half of the gang likes this weird-ass woman that we've never met before. Kaito gets pissy and separates from the group, and Takuma decides to go after him. The strange woman shows everyone else a cable car, then turns into a giant spider monster and covers it in webs. You know, sometimes I wish Takuma's word meant more to the group. Kaito and Takuma then go up there and battle WaruMonaemon. Only Agemon and Drachmon are available for this fight, so I decided to pull out Deltamon from the ranks. I think this is a fun boss battle as well. When the giant Dokugomon is defeated, the other teammates will evacuate the cable car and their Digimon will be available. It took me about 18 turns to defeat. The group pushes forward to the radio tower to see if they can get any reception on their cell phones. Ryo completely loses his mind at this point, hitting Shuji and screaming weird stuff like mama. Unfortunately for him, the gang comes across a Cyclomon who completely knocks him off of a bridge. Somehow, Haru saves him from the fall, which is revealed later. Haru tries to talk and reason with him before coming to the conclusion that he has lost his mind. Ryo then thinks that he sees his mother in the distance due to his hallucinations. He then gets eaten up by the fog with blood drips covering the screen and all. Quigimon then fades away because he doesn't have his partner present anymore. Quigimon was the real loss here. Ryo was just annoying. Miyuki shakes her head but doesn't say anything, which reveals a lot more than it seems. WaruMonaemon returns to her boss explaining what had happened, to which he basically says that she's a failure for not being able to offer a sacrifice. He then gives WaruMonaemon some help in the form of Monzimon and Machinedramon. Garurumon then stops by saying that he wants to make the Digimon pay for teaming up with the humans. Back to the gang, Kaito wakes up in an understandably pissy mood because Miu is still not here. He then tells Takuma to round up everyone by noon, because he's leaving either way. They end up at an old and run-down amusement park. They run into Patamon, Biomon, and Palemon and get into several arguments with them. This was initially cute, but it ends up being kind of annoying and time-consuming. Eventually, they tell Takuma and the gang that they have a small human queen. The gang suspects that this queen is Miu, and they'd be right. Kaito irritates Miu and she decides to use her trapdoor on them. They run into Digimon, who has been watching over Miu and gives the player a huge dialogue dump. Digimon will show everyone the way out of Miu's dungeon, but the gang runs into Palemon, Biomon, and Patamon again. They aren't interested in fighting this time because they are in very rough shape. They tell Takuma that they've been attacked by some enemies and that they are possibly after Miu. The player has the choice to heal them, which I did, but I don't know if there is anything to gain by doing that. They end up going to the throne room again and they find Miu in a chest. She then talks nonsense about this world being cute and nothing dangerous is nearby. Saki then tells Miu that all of her friends are dying, which snaps Miu out of her fantasy state. Everyone realizes that the building is starting to collapse. They all run for the exit, but along their way out, they run into several Palemon, Biomon, and Patamon that are all injured and can't move. It's implied that the building crushes them. God, this game gets brutal. Garurumon and Monzimon catch up to them, which he initiates a fight. Sayokamon digivolves into Shellmon. The fight itself isn't too hard. Monzimon is annoying and raises everyone's attack near him, but it's not that difficult. As we have mostly champions at this point, it really goes by super easily. After fighting, it's revealed that Garurumon still has strength somehow, but he decides to leave. Digimon conveniently has the key that grants them access to below the dam, which is the next destination. This part is annoying, honestly. WaruMonaemon shows up and sets out annoying smoke that tanks my FPS for some reason. This also gets everyone separated and creates clones of all the Digimon. The clone Digimon will talk shit, and the player has to do this for the 4 party members. It gets tiresome by the end of it. After everyone has reunited, WaruMonaemon shows up again as Shuji has an episode. Shuji starts beating the shit out of Lopmon and hopes that it will digivolve. Lopmon gets covered in black fog and digivolves. Shuji's plan both simultaneously works and backfires. Lopmon digivolves into Wendigomon, who obliterates Machinedramon. Wendigomon then turns on Shuji and eats him, complete with blood splatter and everything. Like I said with Ryu, I'd be fine with this loss if the Digimon didn't die too. Rip Lopmon. I wish you could have had a better partner that wasn't an annoying douchebag. Fighting Wendigomon triggers Agummon's ultimate evolution, which I got Triceramon. Man, I should have just followed the moral path and got Metal Greymon. Metal Greymon is just so cool. After the fight, the gang watches the fog swallow Wendigomon. As the fog starts getting thicker, the professor reveals that he is still alive somehow and tells everyone to go for the exit. Part 6 starts out with a flashback of a Gabumon with a boy that looks exactly like Haru. Both of them are surrounded by enemies. The boy tries to distract the enemies while Gabumon digivolves into WaruMonaemon. The young boy, confirmed to be Haru now, gets sucked into a bright light. WaruMonaemon then wakes up by WaruMonaemon. WaruMonaemon, I guess, is butthurt that his partner left him and wants to get revenge on the Digimon that still have partners. Back to Takuma and company, they are understandably shaken up by what had just happened. They are all now starting to doubt their bond between their monster friends, as they just watch one of them turn on their partner and literally kill them. Falcomon takes this argument the hardest and runs off on the group. Minaru chases Falcomon around for a bit, but then WaruMonaemon appears. WaruMonaemon notes that he and the professor both know each other. WaruMonaemon then captures Miyuki, which initiates another battle. Everyone comes in and participates. And yes, this includes Falcomon. 12 turns later, the battle is done, and WaruMonaemon shows up just to do nothing apparently. The gang sees a factory in the background and decides to go there. Meanwhile, WaruMonaemon and WaruMonaemon report back to their boss. The boss calls Miyuki the Maiden, and is once again disgusted by the fact that they come back empty-handed. On a side note, I bumped into a Tentomon who decided to join me. How nice was that? I also bitched a Namco Bandai around this time to get my Guilmon, damn it. He was supposed to come with my pre-ordered copy, but Amazon never gave me a code. I got some other side stuff done, like unlocking both Mermaemon and Crowmon, which are the ultimate Digivolutions for Sayakomon and Falcomon respectively. To get other ultimate Digimon, Takuma must make his affinity for them over 30. Back to the main plot, the professor decided to go back to the shrine. Takuma notices that there is another passage that wasn't there before. Takuma can ask him 3 questions. One is on Haru, one is on WaruMonaemon, and one is on the tune that he was humming. I decided to ask all 3 because I wanted to get all the background info. The professor notes that he has seen Haru somewhere before, but it was years ago and he can't elaborate too much further. Regarding the tune, he doesn't even know himself. He says that he heard it somewhere before and he just likes how it sounds. Again, he uses old age as an excuse for forgetting it, but mentions that he lost his sister when he was young. He thinks that the tune has something to do with his sister, and spoiler alert, he's not wrong. Regarding WaruMonaemon, he thinks that he met WaruMonaemon when he was a wee lad, but says it's too long ago to recall the specifics. Takuma shows him a picture of Miyuki and Haru, in which he says that he sees himself as a child and his sister. He also recalls that his sister called him Haru as a nickname. The gang returns to the dam, where they encounter WaruMonaemon. This will initiate a fight against a bunch of Dokugomon and WaruMonaemon herself. After the fight, the gang let their guard down while WaruMonaemon captures Miyuki. Haru then goes ballistic, saying that they should have killed WaruMonaemon when they had the chance. Haru runs off without them, stating that he doesn't feel safe with them anyway. They decide to follow WaruMonaemon out of the dam and find a Redamon fighting WaruMonaemon itself. They also find a bunch of dead Dokugomon. Another fight breaks out. There's not much to note here other than the fact that Renamon joins the fight, which I think is pretty cool. After the fight, the master reveals his identity to be a Piedmon. Piedmon then kills WaruMonaemon, brutally I might add, for failing her duties. Piedmon decides to take Miyuki for himself. The partner Digimon don't bother fighting back because they sense a huge amount of power that they won't be able to overcome. Renamon wants nothing to do with the group at this point and leaves on their own. Takuma and the professor start to ponder why Miyuki is considered the maiden. Meanwhile, Haru comes along and tells them that she is just a normal girl, and there is nothing special about her. We finally end up at the factory, just to get attacked by WaruMonaemon. I guess it's somewhat substantial, as it took me about 10 turns to complete the fight. After defeating WaruMonaemon, Takuma runs into Piedmon Piedmon, who has Miyuki tied up and is preparing her for a sacrifice. A decent fight is up ahead that took me 14 turns. WaruMonaemon digivolves into WaruMonaemon with the help of the professor. After defeating Piedmon, the fog starts to get thicker, and Takuma rushes to save Miyuki to the dismay of the rest of the group. The group watches as Takuma, Ogremon, Piedmon, and Miyuki disappear. Takuma wakes up in pure darkness, with a creepy-ass voice trying to speak to him. Suddenly, a bright light appears, and Takuma is able to escape the darkness, thanks to Miyuki singing. Miyuki now speaks properly to Takuma, instead of giving him mostly silent responses. She tells Takuma that he would have died if it wasn't for her. After having a flashback of his mother, Takuma wakes up and notices that something feels off. He notices that he made it to the real world with Agumon and Miyuki. Miyuki tells Takuma that she doesn't recognize anything in the real world. Everyone's fashion is different, TVs are much different, and she has no idea what a computer is. They get the news that there was an accident involving a cable car, an abandoned factory has collapsed, and several students were lost to a landslide. Basically, whenever a major event happens in the other world, a similar event will happen in the real world. Unfortunately for Takuma, Piedmon found his way to the real world as well and starts wreaking havoc. They notice that the shrine has been completely collapsed. Now we have to fight Piedmon in the real world, and I actually lost this fight at the first time. My free Digimon are completely goddamn useless, and Agumon ended up dying to Piedmon. If you do some actual planning, this fight isn't too hard, but I just rushed in there and died. After the fight, Miyuki starts singing and summons the same light portal that we've seen before. It swallows up Piedmon. Takuma contemplates going into the portal. There are 3 choices that result in 3 different endings. The game will let the player know that the game branches at this point and will give them a final opportunity to save. One of them is just to go and give up and never go back, which will cause a game over. Be true to my friends will give the moral ending, and save the world will give the harmony ending. There's also a raffle ending, but my compass wasn't high enough to unlock it. I was going to do the harmony ending, but it got spoiled to me that both Miyu and Kaito die, so I was lame and just did the harmony ending. Part 9 opens up with a flashback of Haru in the real world. He tries to tell people nearby that he lost his sister in a different world somehow. They simply write him off and say that he's just hallucinating and that he's a child. Going back to the current time, this flashback was held by the professor. Before long, Takuma regroups with the rest of the gang, losing Miyuki in the process. The gang wants to know what he's been doing for the past 10 days. The problem with the fact is that Takuma was in the real world for only a few hours. This is when they figure out that time flows differently in the real world than the other world. Not long after Takuma rejoins, Miyuki finds the group as well, but she has been possessed. Once again, WaruMonaemon shows up, pissed off at the group for failing to look after Miyuki. They decide to go to the amusement park to talk to Digimon and bump into a beat-up Beomon, Palemon, and Patamon. They make it to the throne room, which initiates a fight. I unlock Ogremon, who is absolutely busted it. Force is one hell of an attack. After the fight, Digimon dies, which was sad. I didn't know this would happen. I'd rather Miyu and Kaito die, damn it. Now we get a cutscene of WaruMonaemon talking to the master, who is still using Miyuki's body. WaruMonaemon says that he'll do anything to get Miyuki back. The gang decides to take all the baby Digimon back to the school that were hiding out in the amusement park. Aoi and Kaito decide to go look for food together, and they think that they see Haru in the forest. The rest of the group decide to go after them, but they run into Renamon. Renamon digivolves and tries to beat them all, but to no avail. We eventually end up in a library, which has the group hallucinating badly. Takuma sees images of Ryu and Shuji, before realizing that these are enemies in disguise. I honestly think this part is filled with mostly repetitive dialogue and fights. The master shows up again and Renamon decides to help the group, digivolving into its ultimate form. This results in a fight that took me roughly 11 turns to beat. They realize that talking to Miyuki will have her break loose from the master's binding for a second or two. They think they can eventually free Miyuki by speaking to her normally. Renamon also mentions during this part that he has shape-shifting abilities and use them to imitate a young Haru this entire time. Part 11 begins with the master talking to Miyuki again. The rest of the group decides that they have to go back to the shrine to save Miyuki. However, before taking a group photo, WaruMonaemon runs into them and tells them to leave. Not long after, several Puppetmon attack the group. WaruMonaemon will digivolve to Metal WaruMonaemon due to his bond with the professor during this fight. I wish that there was more they could say about the fight itself, but it's over in only 5 turns. At least they still take that group photo before leaving. The gang goes to the shrine and notices a passageway that they didn't see before. There, they find Miyuki. This is probably the first fight in the game that feels like a genuine challenge. I actually lost this fight a couple of times due to poor planning and me rushing right in there. Miyuki is a damn powerhouse that takes a good amount of damage, and she keeps summoning these little bastards. These guys all have their own resistances, attacks, movement speeds. It's a lot to keep track of. Eventually, Renamon will get stabbed. It comes with this neat little blood effect that we should all be familiar with by now. Hope's not lost though. Agumon and Gabumon come together to DNA digivolve to Omnimon, or Omegamon. He's neat and all. Supreme Cannon is a cool attack and he gets a nice stat buff, but Terra Force was insane. 15 turns later, I beat this bastard and freed Miyuki. Unfortunately, Renamon dies after the fight. Somewhat. Renamon returns to an egg, kind of like the original Digimon world. The gang asks Miyuki to use her powers to open up the portal to their world. However, Miyuki tells him that this isn't possible at the moment. The professor goes over all the maiden details and tells them that she is in fact his sister, making him Haru. He is actually her younger brother, but due to Miyuki staying in the other world, where time flows differently, Haru appears older than her. We finally get to part 12, the last part of the game, which starts with a slow burn. God damn it, we're still dealing with the slow burn shit this late in the game. A lot of dialogue about the characters' problems and underwhelming fights come up. Luckily for them, Renamon hatches from her egg in rookie form already. I think this is kind of a bummer as I want to see Renamon's in training in baby form, but I guess I'll live. Now we get to the boss fight, which really isn't hard at all, to be honest. All of my partner Digimon get to evolve into their strongest forms, and I was able to have Machinedramon and Metalseedramon for my free Digimon selection help out. I've been going over the story for too long. It's time to wrap things up. We eventually beat the Master and open up a portal to our world. The professor's theory is to have people continuously talk about the other world to save it. The gang wants to bring their monster pals along with them, but they don't think that they can do that. After saying goodbye to their partners, the humans hop into the portal and enter the real world. The game brings us into the real world, where both Haru and Miyuki are hanging out. Haru mentions that Takuma and the others were posting videos and pictures of the other world online. Between that, the shrine, and the video of Piedmon fighting Agumon, Haru believes that this is enough information to save the other world. He also states that since people's beliefs come in form of digital information on the internet, he wants to name the other world the digital world. He also decides that the monsters themselves should be named Digimon. This actually reminds me, besides the title, the word Digimon hasn't appeared in this game once yet. The story is overall interesting, I would argue, but the problem is fluff. Don't get me wrong, I get that it's a visual novel, so it's gonna have a lot of text, but could one argue that pacing is just as important in a visual novel than any other type of game? It seems like the character get into useless banter all the time. Some sections, such as the dam with the fog, talking to Miyu's pals, and even the beginning of the last chapter have so much unnecessary dialogue. When the story is moving at a brisk pace, the story is awesome and full of twists and turns. I love the idea of death hanging over the characters at any point too. It's not an empty threat either. On the first time through, Ryu and Shuji must die. There is no way to save them during the first playthrough. Additional characters can die depending on the ending that the player gets. Speaking of which, I like the whole idea of how the player's choices can change the game significantly, though it could have been better implemented. The idea of Agumon changing Digivolution paths is a neat idea. I was genuinely shocked when I got Tyrannomon, then Triceramon, then WaruMonaemon. However, the thing that some players have an issue with is how the game determines the 3 endings. Throughout the game, Takuma will make either wrathful, moral, or harmonic decisions. These will end up mattering at the end of part 8. Before entering the portal, Takuma will be deciding what to do. I was going to do the harmony option, but it got spoiled to me that Miyu and Keito will die. But shouldn't that be the point? I did mostly a harmonic playthrough, so many would say that I should not have been able to switch the moral ending so easily. Many are arguing that the ending should be solely determined by Takuma's compass at the end. Although, to be fair to the counter argument, I could not pick the wrathful option because my wrathful value was way lower than the other two. The tactical turn-based combat could have been better. These are spread out so far between the visual novel parts, and they aren't that great either. The battles themselves feel short and easy. Granted, I played on normal mode, but that is a difficulty that devs expected most people to play on probably. The fights only felt like they were worth fighting towards the end of the game. Here, they were challenging and lasted more than a couple of turns. Like that fight against Miyuki, that was genuinely hard and took me a good half hour or so. So many fights just ended a couple of turns. It just seems so pointless. That's not to say that there is no strategy in the combat. Each Digimon has an ability that will help them in combat. Some of them will power up specific type moves, let them move twice, let them heal in between turns, and other similar stuff. Digimon Digivolving also costs them their SP, and if the player has other rookies on the field, they will gain SP after every turn. Attacks from the back will do the most damage, attacks from the side will do decent damage, and front attacks are the weakest. The techniques themselves also have different ranges of powers and SP costs. The player can check their opponent's Digimon stats and resistances and weaknesses as well. The player can equip badges to buff up their own monsters. It has the skeleton of a good tactical turn-based game in my opinion, but since the battles are mostly too easy and short, it just feels trivial. On top of that, sometimes it feels like getting free Digimon is goddamn pointless. They aren't nearly as strong as partner Digimon. Maybe unless you get them to Mega Stage and shove a bunch of trading items down their throats. Recruiting them is pretty damn stupid too. To recruit them, the player will have to select the talk option. The Digimon will proceed to ask the player 3 questions. Of the 4 answers, one will calm the Digimon by 2 points, calm them by 1 point, or anger them by 1 or 2 points. To be able to get the Digimon, the player needs to calm the Digimon down by at least 3 points. If the player has only 2 points or under, the enemy Digimon will raise its attack in anger. At first, I kinda dug this. It was kinda fun trying to keep answers straight for each Digimon, but then I noticed something. After answering the questions, there is only a percentage chance of the Digimon joining the party after the battle. The percentage gets stupidly low depending on the Digimon stage and type. After a while, I started using this recruit guide on the Steam community hub. Some may call it cheating, and they'd be right, but goddamn, this got annoying after a while. It's just so so annoying seeing a Digimon you want, then get the questions right, and still have them flee. One can save Scum, but at least on Switch, the battle loading screens are way too long. To make matters worse, the Digimon type matters too. If the player has a raffle alignment, they'll be able to recruit Virus Digimon better, Moral can recruit Vaccine easier, and Harmony can recruit Data easier. The percentages of recruiting Megas creep towards the single digits, and again, this is after getting all the questions right. The player can also ask the Digimon for an item. I did it a couple of times, and the items can be pretty decent. I'd rather have the Digimon in my squad, personally. The last thing I'm not the biggest fan of is saving content behind New Game Plus. I get why the devs did this, obviously. They wanted the game to have higher replayability. After tackling this game for 40 hours though, I don't feel inclined to hop back in whatsoever. I had my fun, but another playthrough will make the game overstay its welcome for me. I'm afraid. The backlog is too deep to justify that time again. I want to see Shuji, Lopmon, Reo, and Quigimon survive, but I think it would have been nice to be able to do that during the first playthrough. Also, locking Guillemon behind pre-orders is pretty scummy in my opinion. He should have been an encounter somewhere in the game. Overall, I like my time with Digimon Survive. It's an interesting visual novel that is unfortunately plagued by inconsistent pacing. While I wouldn't say that the battling is bad, it has its moments where it's really fun, but I found it to be underwhelming overall. I remember heading into this thinking that I would have loved the battling, but not the visual novel parts. If anything, the opposite happened. The visual novel sections and overall story were neat, but the battling left me wanting more. I overall enjoyed my time with the game, and I think that the strong story makes up for the game's missteps. I'd give it a 5 out of 7.